You're listening to The Paul Higgins Show, where ambitious tech consultants come to unlock their potential. After 18 years as a global leader, I launched several businesses, culminating in a successful exit. I'm sharing what I learned, plus what's working now from mentoring tech consultants. You will hear leaders within our industry to help you build a business you love that allows you to do what you want. If you are looking for immediate cash flow wins to fuel your growth, go to our free ebook at paulhigginsmentoring.com/roadmap. You are struggling to drive leads and someone mentions cold email and you go cold, right? You look at your inbox and you see all those unwanted emails already and you think, if I don't like them, why would anyone else? Hello, I'm Paul from The Paul Higgins Show, and welcome to episode 559. In this episode, I talked to Damien from Click Media about cold email. He talks about 3 common myths. He debusts those myths, and he also gives you access to a brilliant playbook so you can go and do this yourself or get someone like Damien to help you. So Damien has been with HubSpot for over 10 years. And he runs an agency here in Australia. Damien's first business was selling Joomla websites door to door. He knew that was a little too strenuous and then turned to creating his own marketing and sales skills, in particular copywriting and messaging, which he is brilliant at, which combines for cold email. And after pivoting to a freelancing copywriting business, he eventually grew his agency, a HubSpot agency, and where he looks at both content marketing, but also implementation. So in the last couple of years, the things that he was doing really well for clients they've asked more of, which was B2B lead generation, in particular cold email. And he's now developed that to be about a third of his existing business. So the great thing here is you get to see both sides. You get to see the client side, how Damien's helped them, but also how he's helping himself to grow his HubSpot agency. You can see Damien on video at our YouTube channel, Paul Higgins Mentoring. So now what I'll do is hand you over to Damien Eastling from click.com.au. That's CLCK.com.au. Great to have you here, Damien.
Great to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, well, look, I've known you for quite some time, and I know you've provided a lot of value to the Tech Collective, which you were once a part of, and then you went off on a slightly different tangent, stopped being a HubSpot partner and went into something different. And I think we'll talk about it definitely today, that it's sort of now come back full circle in a way. But we're here to talk cold email, bust a few myths, and do a few other things. But before we go into the detail of that, why don't you tell us who your ideal client is and what problems you solve for them?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Well, as you said, we are predominantly HubSpot partners these days. So we're working with a lot of smaller businesses to help them implement HubSpot, train their sales teams on getting the most out of it, and both the sales and marketing tools. And we also do about 30% of the business or 40% of the business is outbound lead generation. So helping clients use cold email to generate conversations and meetings for themselves.
Great. And those small businesses, is there any particular characteristics that are similar?
Usually with sales teams, we find we can add the most value. So we've done a lot in construction and property kind of stuff, but yeah, and a lot in B2B, but anyone with more complex buying cycles and sales teams where they require a lot of nurturing, we've got a lot of background in content and things like that. So that's really, I guess, where our strengths are.
Right. And what sort of sales team size is sweet spot for you?
Could be anything. It's anything from sort of 1 to 5, I guess, is where we've spent the most time, and just helping them implement processes and use tools like HubSpot to automate as much as they can, and be more efficient with their processes. Yeah.
Right. And how many are already on HubSpot versus you introducing?
It's probably about 50-50, I guess. Yeah. When you get a good relationship with the internal team at HubSpot, they'll send you more referrals and introduce you to opportunities, which works out really well. And then, of course, it's also beneficial to be going out and bringing opportunities to HubSpot. So probably a 50-50 mix, I'd say.
All right, excellent. So for you, I know that you've been using, as you said, 30-40% of the agency is helping others do cold outreach, but you've been doing cold outreach yourself to gain more clients into your agency, your HubSpot agency. So tell us a little bit about that and how that's been working for you.
Yeah, well, we actually got into it about 5 years ago now, just doing it for ourselves, as you said, and just learnt all about the tools and the strategies and became really interested in just mastering it for ourselves. And the more we did it, and we did use it for client acquisition, and it worked quite well. And as we got better and better at it, people started coming to us and saying, "Hey, I don't need your agency services, but can you teach us how to do cold email, or can you show us how to do this for ourselves?" So I said, "Oh, might be a good opportunity there." So we did sort of pivot and started offering that as a service, and yeah, set up processes around implementing it for clients and just doing the same things that we had been doing for ourselves, but for clients.
And out of the mix of how you generate your own leads at the moment, how much would be through that versus, other means?
Probably about a third of our business comes through our own outreach. And so that's mostly cold email. We'll do a little bit on LinkedIn, but I think cold email is a little bit more scalable than the LinkedIn stuff.
Yeah.
We also do some Facebook ads, ironically. Yeah. So B2B Facebook ads have worked pretty well for us.
Yeah.
And just referrals and partnerships and things like that have probably been about a third of that.
Great. And is LinkedIn, when you said it's a little restricted, is that because of the amount of requests you can send out each week?
Pretty much, yeah, yeah. On LinkedIn, you're limited to, 1 or 200 requests. And then if you've got 30% acceptance, you just trickles down. It's a bit of a numbers game. So you're not actually reaching that many people on LinkedIn. Still good, still a good channel, but it's just not as scalable as email.
Yeah, look, and I think that's one of the reasons that we've got you on the show is to talk to you who, as you said, you've even got referrals. Most of us got referrals, but it's around generating our own sources of leads. And LinkedIn, you're right, the numbers are pretty tight. So I think even 30% is exceptionally good these days. It's sort of getting around 15%. Yes, you're selling large deal sizes, but you still need lots of leads to get those large deal sizes. So that's why I brought Damien on to talk about cold. So we talked about some of the myths and you want to bust some of those. So what are some of the myths around cold email?
Well, a lot of people say, I don't reply to cold emails, so I hate getting those emails. So why would I do it? Why would it work for me? They see it as spam. But I guess it all depends how you do it. And if you make it highly relevant and you personalize the messaging, it becomes a lot less irrelevant, it becomes a lot more sort of pertinent to their role or their job. And a lot of cases, you're helping them solve problems in their business that they might not have even known they had or gone out looking for. So I think that's probably the biggest myth, is that it's somehow spammy or pushy.
If I'm not going to open them, why would anyone else? So that's one myth. What are some other myths?
Probably that you can do it, you should treat it like email marketing. So that's a big one. We're all familiar with email marketing, or most of us are, sending out an EDM to our list of subscribers, and there's a certain format that takes. You might be sending out long form content and teaching and things like that. And a lot of the time when people first approach cold email, they try to do the same things. They think they need to put images and lots of information and copy in the emails. Totally the opposite is true from what we've seen and what's working. The shorter the email, straight to the point, because you've got to remember, you don't have the relationship with that person just yet. It's not like someone who's subscribed, who's already in your ecosystem. They've never heard of you. So you've got to get really to the benefits. And we're finding like a 4 or 5 line email is what really moves the needle. And if they're interested, they'll reply and say, "Tell me more," and you can take the relationship from there.
Right. Well, we'll dig into that more in a moment. Maybe one more. What's one more myth that you see around cold email?
I guess another a big one that people seem to do is just thinking you can take your existing email address or your existing domain and just start sending out hundreds of emails every day, and pretty quickly going to get blacklisted and marked as spam if you do that. So there's a few things you need to be doing just to make sure it's sustainable and that you can be doing it long term. Yeah, I guess we can get into some of that as well.
Yeah, great. So if you go to the first one, which is, if I'm not reading them, why would anyone else? You sort of link that to, short, punchy emails. What are some and so I should preface this, and there'll be a link at the end where Damien's provided a playbook for our community, the Tech Collective. So if you're a member of the Tech Collective, you get access to the full playbook. If you want to find out more about the Tech Collective, there'll be a link below, but at paulhigginsmentoring.com/TC will get you to the Tech Collective. But for those, we'll have a link where it gives a summary of some of the things. So Damien's got it in detail. But, I agree with you, right? It's the quality. Like we all send LinkedIn messages, we all make phone calls, whatever, the quality ones get through and the rest don't. So what makes a really good quality email other than the things you've already mentioned?
I think it's a classic copywriting thing, and it comes down to actually writing how you would talk to someone.
Yes.
And that's another big mistake I see people making. They write it like an ad. And if you're approaching someone with a one-to-one message, you don't want it to sound like an ad. You want it to sound like you've just, like more like a phone call, or you've just met someone in the street. So making it less sort of pushy and blustery, and making it a lot more sort of, I was just curious if, and softening your language a lot and saying, hey, I'm not sure if this is relevant to you, but, all that sort of ways to just, and we get emails all the time saying, I couldn't work out if this was a cold email, if this was an automated email, or if it was just to me. And that's always good feedback when someone says that. So I think that's really a huge part, is just softening the language and making it human to human.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And, what I always talk to my clients around, or the people I help is, first you want to get a reply, then you want some engagement, and then you might have a call to action. Unfortunately, everyone tries to fit that into the one. It's like too much. So from the reply perspective, is it do you always, what's your mechanism to get people to reply on that first message that is more human to human?
Yeah, it's a good question. And often it's open-ended. We'll say something like, would you like some more info about this? Or is this something that's on your radar at the moment? Or is this a priority for you in 2024? So keep it open-ended. And that works well for a couple of reasons, because they're more likely to reply, just say, yes or no, or tell me more. You're not asking for a call, which we sometimes test as well. But the
Yes.
other beauty of it is when they do reply, we can then assess what to do with them, so it gives us more options too. We might say, great, here's my calendar link. Or if they're not such a good prospect after all, we might come back to them and say, here's some more resources. So it gives a bit of freedom both ways.
Yeah, great. And subject lines. I know what you say in the playbook, but I'd love to hear your view here. How important are subject lines?
Then really not that important at all. And what we've found, we've tested all sorts of subject lines. It's more about the sender. And of course, if they don't know you, we still see about 30 to 50% open rates, because it is a personal email. It's coming from a Google workspace in most cases. But whether we say, quick question versus some really long subject line makes hardly any difference. So that's basically what we default to, is something like, question for Paul, quick question, question about such and such, and just keeping it simple.
Yeah, look, it definitely what we've been testing the same thing, one or two words, even if you're following up after connection message is connected. And I think most people, I don't know what the current stats are. What are the current stats of how many people read these on email versus desktop?
It's about 50-50 last I looked. Yeah, it might be more in the mobile space now, but definitely at least 50% mobile.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the person you're contacting. More the salesperson that's in enterprise. Obviously, they're going to be on the road a lot more, or etc. But I think you've got to assume that more people are reading it on the mobile. And does that then mean that the first line is that more important sometimes than the subject?
Definitely, definitely. And that's often where the personalization can come in handy. And even it seems a bit cheesy just to say, hope you're having a great morning, or hope you're having a great Monday. But we found that actually increases reply rates, because it can be automated. A lot of the tools now will just insert time of day or day of week as a personalization token.
Yeah.
But it catches people off guard, because it's like, oh, this couldn't be automated, because it's actually saying, hope you're having a great morning. So having something like that as the first line. And actually, ironically, mentioning LinkedIn, we have found works really well as well. So we say, I found you on LinkedIn, or we're connected on LinkedIn, because in B2B, of course, pretty much everyone's got a LinkedIn profile. So,
Yes.
you're on the money there, no matter who you're emailing, just saying, hey, we're connected on LinkedIn somehow. Very few people actually go and say, hey, can you tell me how we're connected? We're not. And you think, well, if they're that pedantic, they're probably not someone who's going to make a great
Yes.
client anyway. So
Yeah, look, I think that's definitely once again what we've been testing, and it's worked really well. And what about mutual connections on Link? Is that something that you've tried? Has it worked? Not worked?
haven't done a lot with that, but it's definitely an avenue worth exploring, because you can get a lot of data off LinkedIn Sales Navigator now. And one of the search filters on Navigator is to say, show me my second degree connections, my third degree connections. And then you can take those searches and use various tools to extract the prospect list from Sales Navigator. Another cool thing you can do if you are going to use LinkedIn is, if you want to narrow your list a little bit, people who've been active on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. So that's a search filter on Sales Nav. And so if they're active on LinkedIn, they're probably still in business. They're most likely wanting to grow their business, or they're active in their business. So it can really give you a more responsive list.
Yeah, I think that's a great bill because, you can obviously get the mutuals that you can see for first connections, but I think that's a great build looking at your second and thirds. But I certainly know that we That's worked really well. And, it depends on, how specific and custom, which I'm going to ask you in a moment. But I know for me, if I'm reaching out to people to be on my podcast, like you are, Damien, mentioning people that I know are in their connections as first connections and they've been on the show, that really helps, because I think everyone at the moment is, looking for a trusted resource, because we all get bombarded, right? So the more trusted you can make it, I think the better. And just on that customized versus personalization, how does that sort of work with cold email?
Well, again, we've tested that before in the past. You can even go so far as to completely have someone write the first part of the email completely personalized. They can go to their LinkedIn profile, read something about them. We're not sure the juice is worth the squeeze there, because it does increase replies somewhat, but it also adds in a whole another layer of complexity to your process. If you're going to email 1,000 people, suddenly you've got to go through 1,000 LinkedIn profiles. And even if you're paying someone, to do that, it's still quite time consuming and costly. And what it really comes down to is is the offer. It's classic. Is the offer good? Is it something they want and need? Whether
Yes.
you've referred to, some charity they support, or I saw this person recommended you, probably not going to move the needle that much, but it definitely works. Of course, now with AI, there's the other option now. You can almost get AI to go and read their website or their LinkedIn, come back to you with some personalization, which is getting there. It's probably still not 100% yet, that you just want to let it run your campaign, but that's definitely what a lot of people are looking at now.
And is there any particular platforms you think that are going to get it right from an AI personalization point of view?
Big one now everyone's talking about and using is called Clay. You can go on there and it can create all sorts of tables where you're referencing data from different sources and integrating into your campaign. And there's all sorts of competitors to that popping up at the moment, which can be used as well. And so they'll take the data that you can get from somewhere like a Sales Navigator. They can analyze it in a spreadsheet. They can do stuff like, if the company name is sort of long and clunky, they can abbreviate it, so it just makes it sound more human if you're inserting that in an email. It can research their niche and say, insert the types of companies that they're trying to work with and things like that. So there's all sorts of applications for it, and it's getting better and better.
Great. And just out of interest, like, how affordable is Clay for, you're running a HubSpot agency, a Salesforce agency, you're the person that's the owner and doing the sales. Is Clay accessible to someone like that?
Definitely is if you're doing a smaller scale, if you're emailing 500 or 1,000 people a month, it's definitely affordable. If you're going to do it at a huge scale, it does get pretty pricey. But there's all sorts of little workarounds. A lot of people look at the pricing on Clay, and I think it starts at a couple $100 a month. But a lot of people, you can use the API with Clay. So the credits that Clay supplies are not necessarily what you end up having to pay for. You can plug it into other APIs and use their credit systems. So there's all sorts of workarounds, and it's not as expensive as it looks on the surface.
Yeah. Okay, great. And as all of this, it's the process and the technical side. There's the playbook that we can share, but also you can reach out to Damien. We'll have all the links to his LinkedIn and his website in the show notes. And, covered, it doesn't work for me, so why would it work for others? I think that's getting on to the next one, which is, treat email different to your marketing, your newsletter, etc. So I think, that's pretty self-explanatory. The first question I've got, though, is around email marketing is normally got to unsubscribe. What's your view on using an unsubscribe versus a non?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and it depends what country you're targeting, because different countries have different laws. Australia, for example, has fairly strict laws, and technically you're not really meant to email somebody unless you've got the existing relationship. And of course, you're meant to have unsubscribes in most jurisdictions. A lot of the laws are pretty vague on what constitutes an unsubscribe mechanism. So you don't necessarily have to have a link saying click here to unsubscribe. What we often do is just put a disclaimer in the email, which looks like anyone else's standard disclaimer.
Yes.
But in that fine print, we can say, if you no longer want to hear from me, just reply and let me know. And that's usually enough to keep us compliant. But yeah, some people will get annoyed if you're not including a mechanism to unsubscribe, and you're more likely to get reported for spam. And of course, depending on your country, you could get reported to various communications authorities as well.
Yeah, and I think certainly EU group and Canada seem to be more stringent than maybe the US. Is that a fair assumption?
Definitely with GDPR in the EU, and as I said, Australia is fairly strict in this regard. The US, it's fairly open slather.
Yeah.
Flip side of that is it's actually harder to get penetration in the US because it's a lot more saturated. So we do find when we do a campaign in the US, fairly lower response rates and open rates because they're just getting a lot more cold emails.
Great. And, we've really covered the type of email, the format, et cetera, which is fantastic. Is there anything else under this section, this myth, that you want to talk about?
No, I guess just, and also some people try to use something like a MailChimp to do their cold emails. So they'll do a
Yes.
blast sort of all in one go. And it's not really ideal because they'll send it from their email marketing servers and
Yes.
it's in a certain format and it will have the unsubscribe link, for example. So email clients will detect that it's come from a marketing software and it will put it into the promotions tab. It'll have a much lower open rate. So we generally set up separate either Outlook, Microsoft Outlook or Google Workspace accounts just for these cold email campaigns and almost like a little mini business unit on those platforms to run the campaigns from.
Great. So we've talked about, if it doesn't work for me, why not others? We've talked about not treating it as email marketing. The third one is your existing domain, which, I think is one that I still find really, really difficult to understand from when you do use your own domain, whether you're blacklisted or not. But let's first the overall topic. Yeah, should I be using my Gmail as an example for me, or should I be creating a separate domain for these cold emails?
We always recommend, I mean, you can use your main domain, and as long as you're not sending a whole lot of messages every day, it's going to be fine. But as soon as you want to, again, scale it up and send more than sort of 30 messages per day, you're going to need, we just go and create separate domains because they're so cheap. So if you've got paulhigginsmentoring.com, you just go and make paulhiggins.net and just a few different variations on that. Basically, the rule of thumb is that for every separate domain, you can send about 100 emails per day per domain. So if you've got a list of 10,000 prospects and you want to get through them all in a couple of months, you should probably go and register sort of 3, 4, or 5 domains kind of thing. And then 3 email accounts each domain. So you just set up a Google Workspace, set up a few email accounts on each of those domains. And the sending tools will limit how many per day you can send.
I remember in the playbook you talked about 14 days to warm up the domain. What does that actually, is the time right? And what does it mean?
Yeah, well, it's actually minimum 14 days now, and a lot of people recommend longer because
Okay.
that's the other thing. These email tools are catching up. That it's a bit of a cat and mouse game. Same with any sort of whether you're doing SEO or something like that. You're always trying to outsmart the algorithms, I guess. So now they've realized that a lot of people would just go and register a bunch of new domains and start these campaigns. So one of the sort of signals whether to let your email through is the age of the domain. So you have to sort of wait at least 2 weeks, ideally 3 or 4 weeks,
Yeah.
and in the meantime, you can do this warm up process, which is where the email accounts that you registered are sending emails back and forth between other users of the tools. And it's sort of emulating natural human behavior that a business account would be ramping up towards.
Yeah, great. And I know that you mentioned around about 1,000 sample size. And from memory, or you said before that about 50% open rate. I know that you roughly, I think in the playbook said, 10% reply, 2% interested, and then you might get 0.5 booking call. Are those numbers still about the same?
About right. It really does depend on your niche and your offer and things like that. So it can wildly vary between those things, but across different industries, that's pretty much what we see. 10% reply rate, and 90% of those are going to be saying no thanks, not right now,
Yes.
unsubscribe. But you're looking for that sort of overall 1 or 2%, which is saying, yeah, tell me more, I'm open to chat. So it's definitely a numbers game, and it's going to be tough if you've got a really small total addressable market.
Yes.
But the bigger your market, the more countries you're able to target, the more this sort of comes into its own.
Yeah, and for you, what are, given your expertise and when you're reaching out as a HubSpot agency out to your ideal client, what sort of, I suppose, let's cut to the chase. How many calls a month are you booking based on what you've been doing from a cold email?
Yeah, look, we're a pretty small agency, so we're not out to sort of take over the world. We'd be happy to acquire 1 or 2 clients a month. When I get around to doing a campaign for ourselves, I typically will have a list of sort of between sort of 3,000 to 5,000 prospects. And what's actually worked well for us, a lot of these research tools or lead prospecting tools, you can research by technologies. What we've had a lot of success with is finding people using other technologies either we've done it with HubSpot, but also finding people using Salesforce or Marketo, doing campaigns out to them and saying, hey, I noticed you're using Salesforce, or, there's another personalization. It could be inserting the tool name into the email. Notice you're using Active Campaign. Just wondering if it's meeting your needs because we've moved a lot of people from tool over to HubSpot lately and benefit, let me know if this is a priority for you. So that's worked really well for us. And again, it's a fishing expedition. You're going to get most people saying, we're happy with the tool, or we've already moved to HubSpot, whatever it is. But you're going to get a certain percentage coming back and saying, great timing. Yeah, we're sick of this. We can't get reporting. How do you price it? And then, of course, the conversation has started. Loop back to your question, probably generating a couple of meetings a week when we've got a campaign running. What we do see is it's pretty high close rate when we get meetings. It's not like ads where you're sort of sifting through a lot of low quality leads, because you've sort of identified those ideal prospects in your initial target list. When they do come back, they're going to fit into your ideal client sort of persona.
Yeah, and I must admit, we've really struggled with the accuracy of data. I know that in the playbook you've mentioned Apollo is one way to do that. We found that data to be difficult to, well, A, to get, and B, to the accuracy of the data. So, but you're saying that that's not the case for you. You're actually finding Apollo meeting the needs of what tech they're using.
It's certainly not 100%. It is fairly low grade data from something like Apollo, because it's bulk. It's a very popular tool.
Yes.
And it's going to be out of date a lot of the time. So yeah, people come back and say, oh, we stopped using HubSpot years ago, and that sort of thing. But on the whole, more than half, it's actually correct. So you can build a campaign around that. But for any given case, whether it's going to be accurate or not is another story. There are other tools you can use which may have higher accuracy. The most expensive and probably well known is ZoomInfo. I don't know how good their data is, but I know it's pretty expensive. I would assume it's going to be higher accuracy, but I have actually heard anecdotally that it's not. None of these tools are actually that great at keeping track of what people are using.
And most of them pull from the same source. That's our experience with talking to some others. So it's look, I think there's ways to look at, say, LinkedIn groups. So there's LinkedIn groups where there are some ways to get the participating in that, give you a greater success. So there's different ways to cut it. And as I said, you're listening to episode 559 with Damien, and you can get access to the playbook where he goes deep into this. He gives you all the tools, the process. It's really a complete playbook on how do you do cold. But I thought we'd at least get him on to talk about those three biggest myths, bust those, and then you can reach out to him. And what we'll do now is just take a brief break, thank our sponsors, and we'll come straight back. Ever spotted your dream client on LinkedIn only to find yourself bogged down in tedious data transfer at the expense of building that critical relationship? Say goodbye to manual tasks and hello to efficiency with Surfy, S-U-R-F-E. Surfy transforms you from a virtual assistant into a sales pro by seamlessly capturing, syncing, and enriching contacts from LinkedIn into your preferred sales platform, be it Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive, Copper, or even Google Sheets, all in one single click. Imagine reclaiming those precious hours spent on data entry and redirecting them towards nurturing valuable connections and closing deals, which we all love to do. With Surfy, it's not just a dream, it's your new reality. Ready to invest your sales time where it truly matters? Try Surfy today by visiting our resource page at paulhigginsmentoring.com/resources and clicking on Surfy. Elevate your sales game with Surfy, because your success starts after the click. So great to have you back, Damien. So what we're going to do now is a rapid fire round. I'm going to ask you 4 questions, get your rapid fire responses. Are you ready for that?
Sure.
Well, the first one, what are some of the daily habits that you do to help drive your business?
Big game changer for me was blocking out the first half of the day to focus on revenue generating activity. So working on the business, and then not working in the business until the second half of the day. That was a big one for me.
Yeah, great. Second one is, where do you go to find out more? It might be, yes, about cold email, but in business in general, where are you going to find out more about how to grow your business?
I love podcasts, so I listen to a lot of podcasts myself. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups and LinkedIn. So yeah, I'd say social media and podcasts are the big places that I sort of absorb information.
Great. The next one is, if I could grant you one wish for the business, what would that be?
Probably more time in the week for the owner, I guess, would be great. But yeah, that's a big one. It's just prioritizing time.
No, it's hard to give you more time, but I can certainly give you some resources I suggest you can turn to help. The last one is, what do you know now, and put it in the relation to cold email. What do you know now that you wish you had have known a lot earlier?
Running campaigns all the time, whatever your marketing is, just making sure you don't do that yo-yo effect of slowing down and stopping. So always keeping something running, because you never know when the next client is going to drop off, and you want to have a full pipeline ready to replace that when it comes.
Yeah, I think it's so important. If you're, listening to Damien today and you haven't run any campaigns, whether it's to your list, whether it's to your network, whatever, it's like, if you're not putting offers out there, that's why no one's going to buy, right? So I think that's a really good way to end. As I said, we can find Damien on LinkedIn, so I'll put his link in the show notes. You can also go to Click, which is clck.com.au. Damien's a fellow Australian. And also that playbook. So if you go to paulhigginsmentoring.com/cold, you'll get majority of the playbook. And then for those that are in the Tech Collective, you'll get full access to the playbook in Airtable that's available for you right now. But Damien, thanks for your support of our community in the past. And thanks for coming on today and debugging some of the myths around cold email.
Pleasure, Paul. Thank you. I've been a big fan of the podcast for a while, so it's great to be on here and sharing some insights with your community.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cheers.
What a great interview with Damien. I know that he's really helped our community in the past. I love the three key things. So one was, even though you don't think cold email works, that doesn't mean it doesn't work for others. And if you follow Damien's tips in the playbook that's in the links, you'll definitely stand out from the crowd. The second is around do not treat it like email marketing. He gives some great tips there. And finally, make sure you warm that domain even past 14 days. Reach out to Damien on LinkedIn and say that you heard him here on the show, and also ask him questions. Also, your peers could definitely benefit from this, so please share it with them. Nothing worse than keeping it from them. Also, you can watch the episode, as I said, at Paul Higgins Mentoring, our YouTube channel. And if you know a person that you've always wanted to interview or always wanted to hear their story within our world, certainly send their name to me and I will reach out and get them on the show. I'll see you next time on the Paul Higgins Show. Time for action. Let me know what you implemented from the show. I promise to respond. Plus, get the Tech Consultants Roadmap at paulhigginsmentoring.com/roadmap.